The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Brew and Page's, creating a cozy symphony that seemed to pull people closer together. Ethan Rodriguez adjusted his laptop screen for the third time, stealing another glance at the woman 2 tables away. She had been there for over an hour. Architectural blueprints spread across her table like a paper garden, her dark hair catching the warm cafe light as she worked with intense focus. He had noticed her before. Always alone, always working, always beautiful in that effortless way that made his chest tighten. Today, however, fate decided to intervene in the form of a coffee catastrophe. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry." The woman's voice carried genuine distress as her latte spread across his table, threatening his laptop. "No worries at all," Ethan said quickly, moving his computer to safety. Their eyes met for the first time, and he felt something shift in his chest. Hers were the color of honey in sunlight, framed by long lashes that fluttered with embarrassment. "Happens to the best of us." "Maya Chambers," she said, extending a hand that was slightly damp from frantically grabbing napkins. "And I owe you a coffee. Actually, make that 2 coffees and probably your dry cleaning." "Ethan Rodriguez," he replied, his hand lingering in, hers a moment longer than necessary. "And it's just a t-shirt, though I won't say no to that coffee." As she gathered napkins and apologized profusely, Ethan found himself studying the blueprint she was protecting. "Residential design?" he asked, genuinely curious. Maya's face lit up. "Mixed-use development downtown. It's my first major solo project." She paused, looking at him with new interest. "You know architecture?" "Marketing coordinator for a construction firm," he said with a modest shrug. "I spend a lot of time translating architect speak for clients." Something sparked between them in that moment, a recognition, a connection that felt both new and familiar. Maya gathered her things and moved to his table, and they spent the next 2 hours talking. She told him about her dreams of designing spaces that brought communities together. He shared his love for photography, how he captured the buildings she might one day create. "I can't believe I'm saying this to a complete stranger," Maya said as the cafe prepared to close. "But I feel like I've been waiting to meet you." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. "Maybe you have been." They exchanged numbers, and as they stood to leave, Maya touched his arm, a brief electric contact that sent warmth shooting through him. "Thank you for being so gracious about my clumsiness." "Thank you for the best conversation I've had in months," he replied. Walking to their cars, Maya turned back. "Ethan, would you maybe want to grab dinner sometime? I mean, I still owe you for the coffee incident." "I'd like that." "Very much." As he drove home that night, Ethan replayed every moment, every smile, every fleeting touch. He had dated other women, but none had made him feel this instant connection. Maya was different, brilliant, passionate, vulnerable in a way that made him want to protect and cherish her. He didn't know then that he had just planted the seeds of his own heartbreak, or that the woman who had stumbled into his life would teach him the hardest lesson about love. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. But that night, hope bloomed in his chest like spring after a long winter. 3 years. 1,095 days of existing in the beautiful, torturous space between friendship and love. Ethan had become a master of reading the subtle language of Maya's mixed signals, the way she leaned into him during their weekly movie nights, how her hand lingered on his shoulder when she laughed, the soft vulnerability in her voice when she called him at midnight, upset about work or family. "You're the only one who really gets me," she had whispered one particularly difficult evening, curled against him on her couch after a brutal meeting with investors. Her head rested on his chest, and he could smell her shampoo, something floral, that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. His arm tightened around her instinctively. "Always," he had murmured into her hair, meaning it with every fiber of his being. Those moments sustained him through the confusion, Like the night she had too much wine at their friend Jake's wedding and slow danced with him on the empty patio, her body pressed close, swaying to music only they could hear. "We fit together perfectly," she had said, her lips dangerously close to his neck. "Don't you think?" Before he could respond, she had pulled away with a laugh, claiming she needed water, leaving him standing alone under the stars, his heart racing and his mind spinning. Ethan had become Maya's constant, her +1, to work events, her emergency contact, her safe harbor in every storm. When her father had his heart attack, Ethan spent 3 days at the hospital, bringing her coffee and forcing her to eat. When she finally broke down in the sterile waiting room, sobbing into his chest, he held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she had said through her tears. "You're everything to me, Ethan. Everything." But everything apparently had limits. The opportunities he had passed up haunted him in quiet moments. Jessica from his photography class, with her infectious laugh and obvious interest. The brunette at the gym who had slipped him her number twice. The elegant woman at the art gallery who had spent an hour discussing composition with him, her eyes bright with possibility. "She's beautiful," Maya had commented when she caught him talking to Jessica after his exhibition opening. Her tone was casual, but her grip on his arm had tightened possessively. "Are you interested in her?" "Just talking about photography," he had replied, but he had ended his conversation with Jessica abruptly, drawn back into Maya's orbit like a planet unable to escape the pull of its sun. The intimate moments were the cruelest. Like the rainy Thursday when Maya had shown up at his apartment, drenched and shivering, claiming she had locked herself out. She had borrowed his shirt, an old university hoodie that hung loose on her frame, and they had spent the evening cooking together, her bare legs brushing against him in the small kitchen. "This feels so domestic," she had said, standing close as he stirred the sauce. Her hand had rested on his lower back, a touch so natural it felt like they had been together for years, She had trailed off, but the unfinished thought hung between them like a promise. Later, as they watched a movie, she had fallen asleep against him, her breathing soft and even. Ethan had stayed awake all night, memorizing the weight of her in his arms, the way her hand clutched his shirt even in sleep. When morning came, she had awakened slowly, blinking up at him with sleepy confusion before reality crashed back. "Oh God, I'm sorry," she had said, pulling away quickly. "I should go." But before she left, she had kissed his cheek. A soft, lingering press of lips that felt like both a blessing and a curse. These moments accumulated like small treasures and tiny tortures. Maya would text him good morning and good night. She would seek his opinion on everything from work decisions to what dress to wear. She would curl up next to him during their movie marathons, her head on his shoulder, her fingers absently tracing patterns on his arm. "You're my person," she would say. "You know that, right?" And Ethan would nod, even as his heart broke a little. More, because being her person in this incomplete way was better than not being in her life at all. He had convinced himself that patience would be rewarded, that the connection he felt couldn't be one-sided, that eventually she would see what was right in front of her. He had no way of knowing that he was slowly suffocating under the weight of his own hope, or that the woman he loved was taking his devotion for granted, secure in the knowledge that he would always be there, always waiting, always willing to accept whatever scraps of affection she offered. 3 years of almost. 3 years of believing that someday, maybe, possibly, she might love him back. The confession was coming. He could feel it building inside him like a storm. The October evening was perfect, the kind of night that felt designed for important conversations. Ethan had spent hours preparing, transforming his small apartment into something magical. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, candles flickered on every surface, and the scent of Maya's favorite meal, Homemade pasta with truffle oil filled the air. He had practiced the words 100 times in the mirror, each rehearsal feeling both necessary and futile. How do you tell someone they've become your entire world without sounding desperate? How do you confess 3 years of accumulated love without overwhelming them? Maya arrived fashionably late, as always, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the midnight blue dress he had complimented months ago. She had remembered. That had to mean something. Wow, she breathed, taking in the transformed space. What's all this for? Can a guy cook dinner for his favorite person? Ethan asked, his voice steadier than he felt. He pulled out her chair, his hand briefly touching her shoulder as she sat, a contact that sent familiar electricity through him. Dinner was perfection. Maya laughed at his stories, praised his cooking, and seemed more relaxed than she had in months. The wine loosened her tongue, and she talked about her dreams, her fears, the project that was finally giving her recognition in the firm. I couldn't have done any of this without you, she said, reaching across the small table to touch his hand. You've been my rock, Ethan. My constant. The opening he had been waiting for. His heart thundered as he turned his hand palm up, catching her fingers in his. Maya, I need to tell you something. Something in his tone made her still. Her honey-colored eyes searched his face, and he saw the exact moment she realized what was coming. A flicker of panic crossed her features before she schooled them into careful neutrality. I'm in love with you, he said simply, his voice quiet but firm. I have been for 3 years. I know you might not feel the same way, but I can't keep pretending that what I feel is just friendship. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Maya's hand went limp in his, and he felt her emotional retreat, even though she hadn't moved physically. Ethan, she began, her voice soft with something that sounded dangerously like pity. You don't have to say anything right now, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand that when I look at you, when I'm with you, it's not as a friend. It's as a man who loves you completely, who sees a future with you, who... Stop. The word was gentle but final. Maya pulled her hand away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Please stop, he did, his words dying in his throat as he watched her struggle with what to say next. You're my best friend, she said finally, each word carefully chosen. You're the most important person in my life, and I don't want to lose that. But Ethan, I don't see you that way. I've never seen you that way. The words hit him like physical blows, but somehow he remained still, his face composed. 3 years of hope died in that moment, crumbling like old paper in his chest. I love you, she continued, tears now flowing freely. But not the way you want me to. I love you as my dearest friend, as the person I trust most in the world. Can't that be enough? Can we just be friends? For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. He studied her face, the face he had memorized, in 1,000 different lights, in joy and sorrow and everything between. He saw the fear there, the desperate hope that he would accept this consolation prize and continue being her emotional support without expectation. And then, something shifted inside him. A clarity he hadn't expected. A strange sense of peace, settling over the rubble of his shattered dreams. Perfect, he said quietly, his voice carrying no trace of sarcasm or bitterness. Maya blinked in surprise. Perfect? Yes. He stood up slowly, beginning to clear the dishes with methodical calm. Friends it is. She watched him move around the kitchen, confusion replacing relief on her face. You're not angry? Why would I be angry? He turned to face her, and his smile was genuine, if sad. You were honest with me. That's all I could ask for. But something in his demeanor had changed. something she couldn't quite identify. The desperate edge was gone, replaced by a quiet resolution that made her suddenly uneasy. "We're okay?" she asked, standing uncertainly. "We're friends," he said simply. "That's what you wanted, right?" She nodded, but the word felt hollow now, inadequate in a way it never had before. After she left that night, Ethan stood in his apartment surrounded by the remnants of his romantic ambitions. The candles had burned low, the wine glasses sat empty, and the future he had imagined lay in pieces around his feet. But strangely, he felt lighter than he had in years. The answer he had dreaded had finally come, and now he knew exactly where he stood. Friends, just friends. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan Rodriguez knew exactly what he needed to do. The change was so subtle at first that Maya almost missed it. The daily good morning texts stopped arriving with her coffee. The random photos Ethan used to send, sunsets that reminded him of her eyes, street art he thought she'd appreciate, ceased to populate her phone. The man who had been as constant as her heartbeat simply faded. It started the morning after their dinner. Maya had texted him, as she always did. "Thank you for last night. The dinner was incredible. You're amazing." Usually, Ethan would respond within minutes with something warm and encouraging. This time, hours passed before a simple, "Glad you enjoyed it," appeared. No emoji, no follow-up question, no invitation to continue the conversation. Maya stared at the message, unsettled by its brevity. But she pushed the feeling aside. He was probably busy, maybe processing their conversation. He'd bounce back. He always did, but he didn't. The first week, she told herself he needed space. The second week, she began to worry. By the third week, when she realized she hadn't seen or spoken to him beyond polite, surface-level exchanges, panic began to creep in. "Has anyone talked to Ethan lately?" she asked Jake at their usual Friday night hangout. The group felt incomplete without him, like a song missing its melody. "Yeah, actually," Jake said, scrolling through his phone. "He's been posting about his photography business. Looks like he's really going for it full time." Maya's heart clenched. Ethan had talked about leaving his marketing job to pursue photography for years, but she had always discouraged it, worried about the financial instability. He quit his job? Last month, apparently. Got a studio space downtown, already booking wedding gigs. Jake showed her his phone, and Maya stared at the Instagram, account she hadn't realized existed. Rodriguez Lens Photography had hundreds of followers and dozens of posts showcasing work she had never seen. The photos were breathtaking. Intimate wedding moments, golden hour portraits, artistic shots of the city she loved. But what made her chest ache was seeing a version of Ethan she didn't recognize. In the few shots that included him, he looked different, confident, happy, free. One photo made her breath catch. Ethan at what appeared to be a gallery opening, his arm around an elegant redhead who gazed up at him with obvious admiration. The caption read, "Amazing opening night for my first solo exhibition. Grateful for new friendships and fresh perspectives." Maya stared at the image until her eyes burned. When had he had a solo exhibition? Why didn't she know about any of this? Her thumb hovered over the follow button, but something stopped her. This felt like intruding on a life that no longer included her, and the realization hit her like a physical blow. The attempts to reconnect began small. A text about a movie they had discussed months ago, an article about architecture she thought he'd find interesting, an invitation to their usual Thursday coffee meetup. His responses were polite but distant. "Thanks for sharing. Sounds interesting. Can't make it this week, swamped with client work." Each interaction felt like trying to hold water in her. Cupped hands, no matter how tightly she grasped, he slipped away. Maya found herself driving past his apartment building, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. She lingered at Brew and Page's, their old coffee shop, ordering his usual drink out of habit and sitting at what had been their table. The barista, who knew them both, asked about him. "Oh, Ethan doesn't come in anymore," the girl said cheerfully. "But I saw his photography exhibition advertised online. He's really making a name for himself." The exhibition had been 3 blocks away. 3 blocks. And she hadn't known about the most important moment of his professional life. Maya's work began to suffer as Ethan's absence consumed her thoughts. During client meetings, she found herself checking her phone, hoping for a message that never came. Her designs lacked their usual innovation, her passion dimmed by the growing realization of what she had lost. "You seem distracted lately," her colleague Amanda mentioned during lunch. "Everything okay?" "Define okay," Maya said, pushing her salad around her plate. "Have you ever taken someone for granted so completely that you didn't realize they were the most important thing in your life until they disappeared?" Amanda raised an eyebrow. "This about that guy friend of yours? The photographer?" "Former friend, apparently." The words tasted bitter. "I thought friendship would be enough, but I think I was wrong about everything." The breaking point came 6 weeks after their dinner, when Maya saw Ethan at a downtown restaurant through the window. He was animated, laughing at something his companion, a different woman this time, brunette with kind eyes, had said. His face was alive in a way Maya hadn't seen in years, unburdened by the weight of unspoken longing. Maya stood on the sidewalk, invisible behind glass, watching the man she had known better than herself live a life that no longer included her. The woman reached across the table to touch his hand, and Ethan didn't pull away. He smiled, not the careful, hopeful smile he had always given Maya, but something open and genuine and free. In that moment, Maya understood with crystalline clarity what she had done. She had taken his unconditional love and support for granted, assuming it would always be there no matter how she responded to it. She had kept him in emotional limbo for 3 years, feeding him just enough attention to keep him hoping while never giving him what he truly wanted. And now, watching him bloom in her absence, she realized the devastating truth. She had been in love with him all along. She had just been too scared, too comfortable with the safety of one-sided devotion, too selfish to risk changing their dynamic. But her realization had come too late. The man who had waited 3 years for her to see him clearly had finally stopped waiting. Ethan had learned to live without her, and he was thriving. Maya's revelation struck like lightning in the middle of a storm, sudden, illuminating, and devastating. For days after seeing Ethan at the restaurant, she could think of nothing else. The image of his genuine happiness, his easy laughter with another woman, played on an endless loop in her mind, each replay driving the knife of understanding deeper into her chest. She was in love with Ethan Rodriguez, had been, perhaps, for longer than she cared to admit. The realization didn't come gently. It crashed over her like a wave, drowning her in the memory of every moment she had dismissed, every sign she had ignored, every feeling she had rationalized away. Maya began cataloging the evidence of her blindness. The way her heart had lifted whenever he walked into a room, how his opinion mattered more than anyone else's, the jealousy she had disguised as protectiveness when other women showed interest in him, the hollow ache in her chest during these past weeks without him, an ache she had mistaken for missing a friend when it was actually the pain of losing the love of her life. "I'm an idiot," she confessed to her reflection, standing in her bathroom at 3 a.m., unable to sleep for the 4th night running. The biggest idiot who ever lived. The plan formed slowly, desperately. She would go to him, tell him everything, make him understand that she had finally woken up. Surely the 3 years they had shared meant something. Surely the connection she felt wasn't entirely one-sided. Surely there was still time. Maya spent hours crafting the perfect text message, deleting and rewriting until her phone screen was smudged with fingerprints. Finally, she settled on simplicity. "Can we talk? I have something important to tell you. The response came 12 hours later. I'm pretty busy with work these days. Maybe sometime next month? Next month. As if she were a casual acquaintance. Requesting a coffee date, not the woman who had been his world for 3 years. Maya stared at the message until the words blurred. This polite distance was worse than anger would have been. Anger implied passion, suggested that she still mattered, enough to provoke strong emotions. This careful courtesy was the response of someone who had genuinely moved on, who saw her as a closed chapter rather than unfinished business. But Maya had never been one to accept defeat gracefully. She tried showing up at his old apartment, only to learn from his neighbor that he had moved. His new address wasn't listed anywhere she could find. She called his old job, pretending to be a potential client, but they wouldn't forward messages to former employees. Social media became her obsession. She studied every photo on his photography account, analyzing backgrounds for clues about his new life. The redhead appeared frequently, then disappeared. The brunette from the restaurant became a regular fixture. Other women rotated through. Clients, friends, possibilities. All of them looked at Ethan with varying degrees of interest, and he looked back without the desperate longing that had once characterized his gaze when directed at her. The breakthrough came through Jake, who mentioned attending a gallery opening where Ethan was displaying new work. "You should come," Jake said, casually. "He's doing this whole series on emotional architecture, buildings that represent different feelings. Pretty deep stuff." Maya's heart hammered. "Will he want to see me there?" Jake shrugged. "Why wouldn't he? You're friends, right?" Friends. The word that had once felt safe now felt like a prison sentence. Maya spent hours getting ready for the gallery opening, choosing her outfit with the precision of a general planning a battle. The midnight blue dress Ethan had once complimented, hair soft and loose the way he preferred. Perfume he had bought her for her birthday 2 years ago. The gallery was crowded when she arrived, filled with people admiring Ethan's work. Maya moved through the space like a ghost, studying photographs that revealed an artistic maturity she had never seen before. Each image was technically perfect, but also emotionally resonant, as if Ethan had learned to channel his feelings into his art. She found him in the center of the room, surrounded by admirers. He wore a black blazer that made his dark eyes seem deeper, his smile confident and relaxed. The transformation was remarkable. This was not the man who had spent 3 years orbiting her like a lovesick satellite. This was someone who had found his center, his purpose, his power. Maya watched him for 20 minutes, gathering courage, before finally approaching during a lull in conversation. "Ethan?" Her voice came out smaller than intended. He turned, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, maybe even gladness. Then the shutters came down, and he smiled politely. "Maya, I didn't expect to see you here." "Your work is incredible," she said, gesturing to the photographs surrounding them. "I had no idea you'd developed such a distinctive style." "Thank you." His tone was pleasant but distant. "I've had time to focus lately." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Time to focus because he was no longer spending every spare moment catering to her emotional needs. "Ethan, she began, but was interrupted by the brunette from the restaurant, who appeared at his side with 2 glasses of wine. "There you are," the woman said warmly, handing Ethan a glass before noticing Maya. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were talking to someone." "Nina, this is Maya," Ethan said, his hand coming to rest naturally on Nina's lower back. "Maya, meet Nina Chen, my friend." The pause before friend spoke volumes. Maya watched the easy intimacy between them, the way Nina fit naturally into Ethan's space, how he looked at her with attention but not desperation. "It's nice to meet you," Nina said with genuine warmth. "Ethan's mentioned you." Had he? What had he said? The questions burned in Maya's throat, but she only nodded politely. Well, I should let you get back to your guests, Maya said, forcing brightness into her voice. Congratulations on the show. It's really beautiful. She turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped her. Maya. Hope flared in her chest as she turned back. Maybe he would ask to talk privately, maybe. Take care of yourself, he said simply. It was goodbye. Final, gentle, but absolutely certain. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice, and walked quickly toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Nina asking Ethan something about the next piece, their conversation resuming as if Maya had never been there at all. On the street outside, Maya finally let the tears come. She had spent 3 years taking Ethan's devotion for granted, assuming it would always be there when she was ready for it. She had treated his love like a security blanket, something to provide comfort without requiring real commitment in return. Now, watching him thrive without her, she understood the cruelest irony of all. She had fallen in love with him precisely because he had learned to stop loving her. The confident, fulfilled man at that gallery opening was everything she had never allowed him to be while he was focused on her. Ethan had finally learned the lesson Maya had unknowingly taught him, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. He had taken that lesson to heart, applied it with surgical precision, and built a life that no longer revolved around her emotional whims. The woman who had once had everything now had nothing, and the man who had seemed to have nothing had discovered he had everything he needed within himself. Maya drove home through blurry tears, finally understanding that some doors, once closed, are never meant to be opened again. Ethan had loved her completely, waited patiently, and given her every opportunity to choose him. She had chosen friendship instead. And now, friendship was all she would ever have, if she was lucky. Because sometimes walking away really is the loudest answer. And sometimes it's the only one that matters.